The rain in the coastal town of Port Haven didn't just fall. It drummed a rhythmic, persistent beat against the slate roof of the old Victorian manor that housed Blackwood's Antiquities. It was a Thursday, a gray, unassuming afternoon that Julian Vance had earmarked for obligation, not revelation. Julian, a man who spent his days as a structural engineer calculating loads and stresses, found a strange comfort in the chaotic, dusty clutter of his aunt's antique shop. He had come to help move heavy furniture in preparation for the upcoming estate auction. He expected to lift heavy oak tables and stack crates of porcelain. He did not expect to find Elena Cross there. Elena was a restoration artist who worked with his Aunt Martha. She was a woman who seemed to exist in a different time zone than the rest of the world, unhurried, graceful, and possessed of a quiet intensity that Julian found both unnerving and magnetic. She was standing by the tall, mahogany bookshelves in the back parlor, sorting through a collection of leather-bound folios. If you could picture the scene, the lighting was low, the only illumination coming from a vintage brass lamp and the gray daylight filtering through the rain-streaked windows. It cast a silver halo around Elena's silhouette. "You're early," she said, not turning around immediately. Her voice was like the room itself, textured, warm, and hinting at stories untold. Julian shook his wet umbrella, leaving it by the door. "And you're hiding in the back?" he countered with a smile, walking further into the room. "Martha said you might be here. I didn't realize you were tackling the rare book collection solo." Elena turned then. She held a heavy book in her hands, her fingers dusted with the grime of a century. She offered him a smile, not a beaming grin, but that signature soft curving of her lips that reached her eyes. Her eyes were a hazel green, bright against the dim backdrop of the shop. "Someone has to save these from the damp," she said gently. "Besides, I enjoy the quiet. Or I did until you stomped in with the weather." Julian laughed, the sound easy and unforced. Over the last few months, he had crossed paths with Elena a dozen times. Always brief, always polite, yet always leaving him with a lingering sense of curiosity. She was older than the women he usually dated, more settled in her skin, possessing a gravity that he found himself orbiting around without quite understanding why. "I'm here to be the muscle," Julian said, rolling up the sleeves of his flannel shirt. "Martha is on a conference call in the office that sounds like it's going to last until next Tuesday. So, for now I'm at your disposal. What needs moving?" Elena tapped her chin thoughtfully with a gloved finger. "Well, since you're offering the top shelf, there are 3 boxes of maritime logs that need to come down. I was building up the courage to trust that rickety ladder, but I suppose a structural engineer is a safer bet. Much safer." Julian agreed. For the next hour, the shop felt like a capsule sealed off from the world. The only sounds were the rain, the shuffle of paper, and the low hum of their conversation. They moved in a comfortable rhythm. Julian would climb, retrieve, and hand down. Elena would receive, dust, and catalog. They spoke of small things at first, the weather, the town council's new zoning laws, but as the work became repetitive, the conversation deepened. Elena spoke of her work restoring old canvases, how she loved finding the hidden layers of paint beneath the varnish. Julian admitted that he sometimes felt his job was too rigid, too mathematical, and that he missed the creativity of sketching. "Structure is important, Julian," Elena said, looking up at him as he wiped dust from a shelf. "But you have to leave room for the building to breathe. If it's too rigid, it breaks in the wind." Her words hung in the air, weighted with a meaning that felt personal. Julian paused, looking down at her. In the soft light, with a smudge of dust on her cheek, she looked breathtakingly real. Not a curated image, but a living, breathing woman of substance. "I'll keep that in mind," he said softly. The incident, when it happened, came without a prelude. It was a disruption of the peace so sudden that it felt like a film reel snapping. Elena had decided to step up onto a small, vintage step stool to reach a volume that had been missed. It was a simple action. She had done it 1,000 times. But the floorboards of the old manor were uneven, warped by years of settling in sea air. As she reached up, the heel of her boot caught the edge of a Persian rug that lay slightly askew. Julian heard the sound first, a sharp intake of breath, followed by the sickening scuff of leather losing traction. "Julian!" Her voice wasn't a scream, it was a breathless plea. He didn't think. Instinct, sharpened by adrenaline, bypassed his conscious mind completely. He was standing 6 feet away, but he closed the distance in a blur of motion. He saw her pitch backward, her center of gravity lost, her arms flailing for a purchase that wasn't there. The heavy book she was holding flew from her hands, landing with a dull thud on the carpet. Julian lunged. His arm shot out, hooking around her waist, while his other hand instinctively went to support her shoulder. The momentum of her fall collided with his solid stance. He braced his legs, absorbing the weight, swinging her slightly around to keep them both from toppling into a stack of crates. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. Then, stillness. Julian stood with his back against the heavy oak bookshelf, breathing hard. Elena was pressed firmly against him, her feet barely touching the floor, her hands clutching the fabric of his shirt so tightly her knuckles were white. "I've got you." Julian breathed out, the words vibrating in his chest, directly against hers. "I've got you, Elena. You're okay." He waited for her to pull away, to laugh it off, to step back into the polite distance of friendship, but she didn't. She couldn't. "My ankle," she whispered, her voice trembling. A sharp hiss of pain escaped her lips. "I think I twisted it when the rug moved." Julian immediately tightened his hold. He became acutely aware of everything at once. The rapid hammering of her heart against his ribs, the scent of sandalwood and old paper that clung to her hair, and the undeniable softness of her form against the rigidity of his own. "Okay?" he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming an anchor. "Don't try to stand on it yet. Just lean on me. Put all your weight on me." Elena looked up. Her face was inches from his. The shock of the fall had stripped away her usual composed veneer, leaving her eyes wide and unguarded. A flush of embarrassment rose in her cheeks, turning them a delicate shade of rose, but beneath the embarrassment was something else, a raw, frantic vulnerability. "I feel so foolish," she murmured, her gaze darting to his chin, then his eyes. "I should have checked the rug." "Elena, look at me." Julian waited until her eyes locked onto his. "It was an accident. You're not foolish, you're hurt. There's a difference." He adjusted his grip, moving one hand to the small of her back to steady her. The movement was practical, yet the sensation of his hand on her spine sent a jolt of electricity through him that had nothing to do with adrenaline. It was intimate. It was possessive in a way he hadn't authorized himself to feel. "I need to get you to the armchair," he said, nodding toward the velvet wingback chair near the fireplace. "It's about 10 feet. Kalina bit her lip, nodding slowly. "I think so." "I'm sorry, Julian. You came here to move tables, not haul me around." "Stop apologizing," he said gently, a small smile touching his lips to reassure her. "I'd rather catch you than a table any day." He took the lead. "Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. They moved together. It was a slow, clumsy dance. Every time her injured foot hovered near the ground, she winced, and Julian instinctively pulled her closer, practically lifting her off the floor. His arm was a band of iron around her waist. Her arm was draped over his shoulders, her fingers brushing the nape of his neck. With every step, the air in the room seemed to thicken. The dust motes dancing in the lamp light seemed to slow down. Julian was hyper, aware of the warmth radiating from her, the way her breath hitched when she misstepped, and the absolute trust she was placing in his physical strength. When they finally reached the chair, he didn't just dump her into it. He lowered her with agonizing care, controlling the descent until she was safely seated. Elena let out a long exhale, her head falling back against the velvet headrest. She looked exhausted, her hair slightly mussed, her eyes closed. Julian knelt before her. The shift in elevation changed the dynamic. He was looking up at her now in a position of service, of care. "Let me see," he said quietly. He reached for her boot. It was a sturdy leather lace-up. "I need to take this off before the swelling sets in. Is that okay?" Elena opened her eyes. She looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time, not as Martha's nephew, not as the structural engineer, but as a man who had caught her when she fell. "Yes," she whispered. "Please." His fingers were deft and gentle as he worked the laces. The room was silent save for the rain. The intimacy of the act, unlacing a woman's shoe, holding her heel in his palm, felt profound. When he slid the boot off, she gasped slightly, not from pain, but from the sudden release of pressure. He peeled back her sock gently. The ankle was already looking angry, a puff of redness beginning to form. He cradled her foot in his hands, his thumbs grazing the arch of her foot lightly to check for breaks. His hands were large, warm, and calloused. "Nothing feels broken," he assessed, his professional, analytical brain taking over to mask the turmoil in his chest. "But it's going to be a nasty sprain. We need ice?" "There's a mini fridge in the office," Elena said. "Martha keeps ice packs for her migraines." "Stay here. Don't move." Julian went to the office, grabbed the ice pack and a towel, and returned in seconds. He didn't want to leave her alone in the gloom. When he returned, he wrapped the ice in the towel and applied it gently to her ankle. Elena hissed through her teeth, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. I know. Cold burns," he soothed. He remained kneeling, holding the ice pack in place because there was nowhere to prop her foot. Minutes passed in silence. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a heavy, languid atmosphere. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a heightened sense of awareness. I hate this, Alina admitted suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was low. Julian looked up. The pain, the helplessness, she corrected. She gestured vaguely with one hand. I've spent 20 years building a life where I don't need to rely on anyone. I climb my own ladders. I fix my own problems. And in 2 seconds, I'm reduced to this, needing to be carried. Julian held her gaze. He saw the pride there, fierce and brittle. He understood then why she always seemed so separate from the crowd. It wasn't aloofness, it was armor. Alina, he said, his voice rough with honesty. There is no prize for doing everything alone. Even the strongest bridges have support beams. If they didn't, they'd collapse under their own weight. He shifted slightly, his thumb absent-mindedly stroking the side of her foot above the ice pack. And for the record, you weren't carried. You were supported. There's a difference. You leaned on me. That doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. Alina stared at him. The rain battered the window pane, a chaotic backdrop to the stillness between them. A tear, unbidden and singular, escaped the corner of her eye. She brushed it away quickly. But Julian saw it. I'm not used to it, she confessed, her voice barely audible. Trusting someone to catch me. Well, Julian said, shifting his hand to cover hers where it rested on her knee. His skin was warm against hers. You're going to have to get used to it. Because I'm not planning on letting you fall. The words hung there, bridging the gap between friendship and something far deeper. It was a declaration, unspoken, but clearly heard. Alina looked at his hand on hers, then up to his face. Her expression softened, the tension draining out of her shoulders. She turned her hand over, interlacing her fingers with his. The squeeze was tentative, testing the waters. Thank you, Julian, she said. They stayed like that for a long time, him kneeling, her seated, hands clasped, the ice pack melting between them. The boundaries of their relationship had been redrawn in the span of 20 minutes. The professional distance was gone, replaced by a shared memory of fear and the comforting weight of safety. The sound of the front door opening shattered the moment. Julian. Alina, why is it so dark in here? It was Aunt Martha. Julian didn't jump away like a guilty teenager, and Alina didn't pull her hand back. He gave Alina's fingers one last, reassuring squeeze before standing up slowly. In the back parlor, Martha, Julian called out, his voice steady. We had a bit of an accident with the ladder. Martha bustled in, shaking off a wet raincoat, flicking on the overhead lights. The sudden brightness was jarring, washing away the shadows and the golden intimacy of the lamp. But the connection remained. Good heavens! Martha exclaimed. Alina, dear, are you all right? I'm fine, Martha, Alina said, her voice stronger now, composed. She looked at Julian, a secret smile playing on her lips. Julian took excellent care of me. It's a sprain, Julian reported, stepping into his role as the practical nephew. She shouldn't drive. The clutch will be impossible to operate with that ankle. Oh, dear, Martha fretted. I can call a cab. No need, Julian cut in smoothly. My truck is outside. I'll drive her home. He looked at Alina, raising an eyebrow in a silent question. Is that okay? Alina nodded. I'd appreciate that. The process of getting her to the truck was less frantic than the initial rescue, but no less intimate. Julian helped her stand, and she leaned into him naturally this time, her body remembering the contours of his. They moved through the rain to his truck, him shielding her with an umbrella, ensuring she didn't get a drop on her. Once she was settled in the passenger seat, and he climbed in the driver's side, the silence of the cab wrapped around them. It was a private space, smelling of leather and rain. He started the engine but didn't put it in gear immediately. He turned to look at her. The dashboard lights cast a soft blue glow over her features. You okay, he asked. Better than okay, she answered honestly. She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm, lingering on the flannel sleeve. You were right, you know. About what? About bridges. And support beams. She looked out the windshield at the rain-slicked street. Maybe I've been building the wrong kind of architecture. Julian smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. Then we'll draft some new blueprints. Together, he put the truck in gear and pulled away from the curb. As they drove through the winding streets of Port Haven, the rain continued to fall, but inside the truck, it felt warm, secure, and full of promise. When they arrived at her cottage, Julian didn't just drop her off. He walked her to the door, carrying her weight again. Unlocking the door for her, he made sure she was settled on her sofa, fetched her a glass of water, and propped her foot up on pillows. Standing by the door, ready to leave, he paused. I'll check on you tomorrow, he said. Bring you some coffee. Maybe that book you dropped. Alina looked at him from across the room. The distance felt negligible. The invisible thread that had spun between them in the shop was now a cable of steel. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." Julian nodded, a sense of completion settling in his chest. He stepped out into the night, the rain no longer feeling cold, but cleansing. He knew, with the certainty of a man who understands structural integrity, that the foundation of something enduring had just been laid. And for the first time in a long time, he couldn't wait to see what they would build.